My name's Charlie Leadbeater, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you to this very special event, the inaugural Future of Work Awards. So, quick housekeeping note just before we get started. Please make sure your mobile phones are on, but switch to silent. We're filming tonight's event, and it's also being live streamed. So welcome to everyone joining us online. And a reminder that the hashtag is #FutureWorkAwards if you'd like to get involved in the discussion on Twitter, and if you hear about ideas tonight that you think are worth sharing, because we do want to share everything that we are learning through this awards process, and we are incredibly proud of all the individuals and organizations we're celebrating tonight, and we want to share what they have been doing. And we want to do that for a very simple reason, that we want to try and create a more creative, more positive conversation about the future of work so that people feel they can shape work rather than being on the receiving end of change. The Future of Work Awards, this is how it worked, really. So the Future of Work Awards, a colleague of mine, Jenny Winhall, and I were thinking about doing some work around the future of work, some kind of design and research work, and we thought it would be a good idea to go and find out what people are doing, where are interesting ideas coming from. So then we thought, well, actually, if we're going to do that, it'd be a good idea, rather than keeping it to ourselves, we could share it. Perhaps we could turn it into an award scheme. At the time, we were in Vancouver, and someone said, oh, you should go and talk to this guy, John Shell. So luckily, John Shell was in Vancouver at the same time, and he took me to lunch in a Lebanese restaurant in a basement. And I had one of those strange conversations where everything I said, he said, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. And at the end of it, he shook my hand, and he seemed to have agreed to become a founding partner in the process, subsequently not only giving us a lot of his research, but also a researcher to boot for a few months to help us with it. So then I came back to London. I thought, how am I going to get the money to make this work? I'll call Steve Roberts at Barclays, who I'd sort of done various things with. Usually, when you send that email, it takes like a month to get a reply, and then a month to have a meeting, and then a month for them to say no eventually. So you've wasted 3 months just to get to know. Instead of which Steve said, oh, come over and talk to me, and I sat down with him and Kirsty, and he said, that sounds like a great idea. Yeah, we can back that. That's fantastic. So the next port of call was Matthew at the RSA. And so I said, I'm trying to create this thing, the Future of Work Awards, and I've got some sponsorship from Barclays, and I've got some support from social capital partners. Do you think it would be an idea the RSA would be interested in? And normally what happens at that point is the organization you're talking to says, yeah, of course we'd be interested, but we would need to brand it as our project and take control over it and probably put someone in to run it. And actually, Matthew, to his credit, said none of those things. He just said, yeah, that's a great idea. So there we are. After a few weeks, we had this entire project. We had an incredible idea, and we had a brilliant idea of A and Z, but absolutely no idea how to get to B, C, D, and E, which is the kind of crucial thing. So the thing that I've learned from other projects is that you have to find someone who's really, really good to do it. So lurking in a cupboard somewhere underneath the stairs in the RSA, we found Fabian Wallace-Stevens in this sort of dark, sort of contained space, a bit like Harry Potter, you know, living with his muggle parents or whatever. And so we took Fabian out of that darkened space into the light and said, it is now your job, Fabian, with Rich, his associate, to research the Future of Work Awards. Off you go and do it. And remarkably, that is exactly what he then did. He just went off and did it. And occasionally we would sort of call in, you know, it's like communicating with a stricken submarine on the floor of the ocean. Are you still there? Are you still alive? Has the oxygen run out? No. And Fabian and Rich and Elvis would sort of just get on. Anyway, over the months that it then took, they managed to uncover 400 different innovations from around the world, all organized around the future of work. And what we're going to do tonight is announce our very first cohort of winners. we're going to hear from some of those in person who are trying to create better solutions for work, which work with flexibility to provide greater security and cohesion. And we expect the awards bit of the presentation after a panel discussion to be finished by 7:15. So, and there'll be drinks afterwards. Please come and join us for drinks where you'll be able to meet more of the award winners. So we've got a packed session, and to kick us off, Matthew Taylor, the Chief Executive of the RSA.
It's such a big night tonight. We've run out of microphones, so we had to find this in the same cupboard we found Fabs. I'm really, really upset that I can't stay with you for the whole evening. I've got to go and do a program called Moral Maze, and this isn't for tweeting, but I'd really much rather be here than doing that. But don't tell the BBC. I need the work. I just want to give you kind of 3 or 4 key messages before I hand back to Charlie. The first is, the first message is don't be miserable. Now, I know that's hard right now, but what this process has taught us is that, yes, the world of work is changing, and it's almost impossible to open a newspaper without reading about how gig platforms are atomizing labour markets, technologies are automating jobs, the robots, your next boss will be an AI. And people fear that those trends inexorably lead to greater economic insecurity. But what the Future of Work Awards show, what the winners show, is that we can actually work with the grain of these trends, and we can harness the benefits of flexibility and technological disruption. And we can do that without foregoing social inclusion and security. So the first message is we don't need to be miserable. The second message is, and this is really easy one for everybody, I think, don't just rely on the government. I did a piece of work for the Prime Minister a couple of years ago about the future of work, and I'm very proud that the government is implementing 51 of the 53 recommendations that I had in that report, and I think that will make a real difference to the framework of rights that exist in this country, and there's probably more scope for further government action. But the government is not the only avenue for making a difference. What the Future Work Awards reveal is that there are amazing solutions emerging from civil society groups, from the trade union movement, from within large corporates, and from profit-making startups, and actually just from everyday employers who say, no, actually this doesn't work anymore and we need to do things differently. The third message is don't be modest. So I think when you hear, I've judged lots of kind of awards around these kinds of ideas, new initiatives and startups and social enterprises, and as Charlie will confirm, because we're both kind of long in the tooth, one of the depressing things about this process is often when you go back and look at these things, they burnt brightly in the sky for a while and then they disappeared. What's really exciting about some of the things that we're talking about tonight is that they may have started as grassroots initiatives, crazy innovations, the inspiration of a particular person, but actually, far from disappearing without a trace or struggling along without achieving any significance, the Future Work Awards show that actually these ideas can grow to scale and they can grow quickly. Portify are growing their client base by 10% a month. Birtsorg now have 10,000 plus care workers on their books. The digital credential platform Credly uses a digital badge every second of every business day. So there's real scope for these kinds of initiatives to change people's lives at scale. And finally, my final message is this: although this is an award ceremony, often that can feel like it's the end of a process. It's absolutely not the end of the process. We have put these awards together with Charlie's support, with Barclays' support. Yes, to give award winners legitimacy and recognition for their efforts. But also what we're exploring is connecting award winners to clients and to new sources of finance, and using their examples to encourage others to start their own good work initiatives. It would be entirely inappropriate of me to use this platform to look at our supporters from Barclays and say, I'm looking forward to next year's Good Work Awards, because that would be bouncing them into supporting our initiative. But nevertheless, I am looking forward to next year's Future of Work Awards. As I say, I can't stay. Fortunately, I do know what you're going to hear because I was involved in the judging process, and you're going to hear some really inspirational stuff over the next hour or so. So, thank you.
So, as Matthew said, the event tonight is part of the RSA's Future of Work Centre, which is supported by Taylor Wessing, Friends Provident Foundation, Google.org, and the RSA Fellowship. So now we're just going to have a panel discussion with 4 people who are involved in central ways in organisations which have won awards. So I'm going to invite to the stage Sarah de Hooch-Ribessin from SMART, from Brussels, Jonathan Finkelstein from Credly, which is the digital credentials organisation, Joanna Boufoy from Bob Employ from France, and Nat Wally from Organise. So Sarah, starting with you, just tell us a bit about SMART and where it started and what it's become.
So SMART started in 1998, so about 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago now. And it started to support freelance artists. Basically, SMART means Société Mutuelle pour Artistes, so Mutual Society for Artists. And it started as a small non-profit organization that was dealing with artists that had 3 main characteristics, I would say. They were freelancers, they had different contractors, they had different jobs to make a living, and they were also dealing with changing teams. And today, SMART is a cooperative that is active in 9 European countries, and we count over 100,000 people who've used our services, and last year they invoiced for over 200 million euros. So you can see that small entities can really...
So that's interesting, because I assumed that SMART was some reference to IT or something like that. It's actually completely different. Yes. What's the offer that you make to people to become members of the cooperative?
So basically there's 2 aspects. We help them develop their activity with online tools. They can deal with administrative complexities that in continental Europe can be very burdensome. And our software really simplifies all the legal aspects. And we also are a shared enterprise, which allows them to really use SMART as if it was their enterprise, and they use it as they need it with the teams that they need that are changing all the time, basically. And along with this, we also provide them with the most protective legal status, which is the one of employees, salaried worker.
So they're freelance, but because they're a member of your organisation, they have the protections of being an employee, even though they work freelance.
They work freelance, and the time of their contract, we are their employer. So it gives them that flexibility as well.
At the time of the contract, but not, so it just kicks in when the contract starts?
So we have started last year an experiment, which was providing those who can and who want, because we have very different profiles, they can have open-ended contracts with us. So if they have enough volume of activity, we can hire them.
And then what practical kind of offers do you make to people that make it such a... Because a lot of people might say, oh, that sounds very nice, but, you know, kind of freelancers and self-employed people are famously very kind of stingy and careful with their money. Why would they work with something like you?
Well, above the fact that they're opening rights to Social Security, they also have access to the mutualized services that we provide them. So it's an extra solidarity. Along the years, because we have so many members, and that we're a nonprofit, we re-inject all the benefits in the development of new services. So along the years, we were able to provide them with a guarantee fund. So we pay them within 7 working days in Belgium. We have a debt collection also, of course. We have adapted insurances for accidents at work that is extended to private life. And we have training, personal advice as well. We have, like in Belgium alone, we have 11 offices that are open because it's very important to be able to advise them.
For people coming in, asking questions about tax, security,
exactly.
so on and so forth. And who, you've got 23,000 members, I think, is it? Active in Belgium. How many of them are now artists? And
So we've opened up to freelancers about 3 years ago, I would say, and I would say now that the creatives are half our members. All the others are in what some would call new generation of freelancers. So there'll be coaches, they do training, IT consultants or consultants broadly, researchers, graphic designers, but those are in creative sector. So a very wide profile. And we also had, for a moment, we supported the writers of Deliveroo and Take It Easy, which was an experiment that only lasted 2 years, but it was quite interesting.
And it didn't work.
It did, until the legislation changed, and it was no longer interesting for the platform Deliveroo to work with us.
Right, I see. And you're growing at sort of 10% a year or something like that.
Two digits.
Two
yeah.
digits.
Yeah.
So more than that. Where do you see yourself headed?
Well, it's always about supporting our members in their needs, and we've developed services that are really for freelancers. And now we want to help support those who are in a more mature state of their business to help them, and also small businesses, because we see it's a real ecosystem of freelancers and small businesses that we want to support, and we are already supporting actually, but we'll do it more formally.
Because most of the freelancers are working for small businesses in some shape or form, and the employers need support as well as the freelancers.
Exactly.
Yeah, great, thank you. Jonathan. What was that? A digital badge a second or something? What does Credly do?
So if you think about all the things that you know and that you can do and that people rely on every day to put you to work and to open opportunities to you, think about how many of those things that you know and you can do are actually recorded in some kind of verified way versus you self-reporting it or hoping somebody gives you the chance to tell your story. Most of us have a CV or an online profile or a resume, but virtually none of it is verified. And what Credly does is we essentially help every member of the workforce develop a verified CV or profile, and we do that by actually getting organizations who see you in action and see your skills, who observe the learning and your performance and your certifications. We get those organizations to issue a digital version of your skill or your certification, which then becomes portable and discoverable, and it belongs to you as an individual as you navigate promotions, new jobs, new learning opportunities.
So it's kind of recommendations people give you on LinkedIn that you're good at X or good at Y, would it be a more formal version of that? Or even more, the training you might get if you're, I think I went on one training course when I was employed by the FT. And it would be, to spell that out, what you actually learned and what you can do?
I would say it's a lot more like organizations minting currency that turn your human capital into something you can actually spend. So in other words, it's an entire organization usually that's standing behind the skill that's being verified, much like someone handing you a note or a piece of paper currency that's backed by the full faith and credit of an organization that both defined the skills that mattered and that they valued, saw you and observed you or verified that you have them, and then provided it to you in a way that's not just visible within the organization, whether it's an association or a large company or a small company or an educational institution, but is visible and understood by everyone around the world because it's in a common open language.
And what about the importance of these sort of soft skills which are quite tacit, difficult to define, collaboration, empathy, so on and so forth, grit? Is there a way within Credly of recognizing those kinds of things?
There is, and it is one of the trending types of skills, largely because often people have a hard time thinking about how do you describe those skills? How do you do them in a way where they have just as much value as the industry certification that might be well known across your company or your organization? How do you create the equivalents for those kinds of so-called soft skills? I think of them as human skills. They're the actual skills that determine whether you'll actually succeed at your job. But what we help organizations do is break down whatever the skill or outcome or achievement or metric that you're rewarding or acknowledging is. We help you structure it. So every skill, no matter what it is, has the same common set of information. where was it observed? Who observed it? What kind of assessment was involved? What period of time did it take for that skill to be developed? Does it expire, or is it evergreen? Is it issued directly by an organization, or an organization that was authorized to issue it from another one? And so no matter what skill, we're providing context and depth and rigor, so you can start to look across a whole range of outcomes that we all possess in this room, and start to realize that perhaps the person in the marketing department actually knows some tech skills, and maybe the person in the tech department actually knows some marketing skills, and maybe we can start to get people to work not just based on arbitrary job titles or degrees or pedigree, by what they can actually do.
So it builds up a much richer, more detailed account of what people can do, where they've learned that, how they've shown it, which isn't just captured by a piece of paper or kind of some sort of CV resume type thing.
That's right, and doing all of that in a way that the earner, the individual, controls and owns. So the employer that's issuing a credential to their employee who learned some data analytics skills or customer service by being on the front line at the local convenience store or gas station, they both, each of those individuals is now can choose how and where they want to use that, not just for potentially a promotion within their company, but to look laterally or beyond to see how their skills, because they've been spelled out, might actually connect to needs in related careers or pathways. That's one of the surprising things about all of this, is when you start to put a common set of language around skills, people start to see pathways and opportunities that they may never have considered.
And how many people now using your platform or using this?
So Credly has tens of millions of credentials under our umbrella. Our network has thousands of organizations, and it's becoming increasingly common for an individual to have earned a credential or a badge from 3, 4, 7, 10, 40 different organizations, depending on what fields they're in. So for some people, that vision of a completely verified story that they can use to be empowered is starting to be more fully realized.
Great. So Joanna, you're dealing with individuals looking for work, with also a kind of tech-enabled solution at Bob. I should say at this point that Joanna has just become a naturalized French citizen. Is that right?
Yes, last week.
Last week. So a month before Brexit. She's
Just in time.
what
I applied the day of the vote.
You applied the day of the vote,
Yeah.
and you've just become French. Congratulations. When can we... when can we... and you live in Paris?
Yes.
Do you have a spare room in your... You do? Yeah, okay. So we'll come and... And you work for Bob, or Bob Employ?
Yeah, so Base Impact is the NGO. It's a non-profit tech organ. So we'll talk about tech companies. It's a tech non-profit with the idea of using all the techniques and methodologies we use, big tech companies use, but for common good. So that's the goal. And so we want to empower individuals to manage their career and their job choices using information. So the idea is that with artificial intelligence, everybody can become their own job coach. So job coaching, individualized, personalized job coaching is the most effective way for people to get a job or to improve their career, but it's very expensive. So it's costly and it's hard to scale. And so with using AI, we can provide a much cheaper
So
solution.
I'm looking for a job, and I might, if I was unemployed, go to a Job Centre Plus or a coach. Instead, I could go to Bob Employ. And what would I do when I got to Bob Employ?
Well, ideally, as well, you would. So
As well as, it would be it's a sort of augmented thing where you do the human thing and the tech thing.
Yeah, so the thing about having the free platform, which is very user friendly, it's very easy to. It's much more easy to start using Bob than to go through the traditional process. So you can immediately find out what your employability. So we try and give an employability score. How likely are you to find the job that you're looking for, based on where you are, what the job is, and your search methods. So we're using data from lots of sources, from the government, from the OECD, in order to combine. It's a bit like a recipe. You combine somebody's personal information with large scale. So here it's national French data in order to help them understand where they are in the
And
system.
then give them recommendations about what they might do to improve their chances.
Exactly, yeah. So far we've helped nearly 200,000 people, and we're 8 people in between Paris and Lyon. So
8 people have helped 200,000 people search for a job in 2 years on a free platform.
Yes.
Without state support.
With state help with the data. So
Right. So the data has come from the public, but you're
Yeah.
you're not being paid for by a public service.
No.
No.
But
It's
that's
philanthropically funded.
exactly that, because that's the beginning.
Yeah.
That's where we are now. But we would really love to be. We think of ourselves as a public service, and we
So
would
you're
really
a
like
sort
to
of
be part of the
public service in the process of growing and becoming, because actually the public service hasn't done what you have done. It could have done what you've done, but it hasn't.
Yeah, it could have done, but we definitely see Bob as a partner of Pôle Emploi, which is the French National Employment Agency, and the idea is that before meeting a counsellor, if the careers advisor has the information that Bob can provide, it speeds up the process,
Right.
and it also allows the person to enter the search much more quickly.
And so some people might think, and I have thought this myself about these sorts of things, oh, that sounds kind of easy to do, but how effective is it really to do that kind of search? Can it really make a difference?
Yeah. So 90% of people who use Bob say that it's as or more personalized than an in-person human-to-human interaction, which is a bit surprising. But also gives a lot
Depends
of...
which job centre you go to, I suppose. I mean, the public sector is not always known for the deep personality of its services, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so 45% of these people who have found a job whilst using Bob said that Bob contributed to them finding a job.
Yeah.
So we're really happy with the success in France, but we need, you asked at the beginning, what do you need? We would really need the infrastructure of the job centre, of the national infrastructure, in order to scale Bob to the
Right.
the millions
So
of
you need to
people.
connect with the public sector
Yeah.
in some kind of way. And just finally, I noticed that you talk about Bob in quite personal terms. Does Bob exist? I mean, is Bob a kind of person?
Well,
Does it have a
Bob-
personality?
Bob, we call it, Bob has a soul.
A soul? How
Um,
French? Yes. Does Bob smoke giton?
Does Bob what?
Smoke giton? No.
Bob is a non-smoker.
Oh, right.
But Bob is your friend, the person you know in your social circle,
Right.
who you feel like has got all of the smart tips, and you don't know how he or she got them.
Right.
But they're the person who really knows the craft of life.
Ah.
And so the idea is that Bob has principles of care. For example, Bob won't tell you to move to another town before he's offered you a different kind of job, or suggested that you try and use your skills to get a different kind of job where you live. So he tries to avoid disruption, personal disruption, family disruption, and he prioritizes your needs as a
So it's a
human.
kind of caring AI then, in a way.
Very caring.
Yeah. It's kind of care written into an AI,
Yeah, and that's
which
really
turns out to be
interesting.
more personalised than a person.
Well, it depends on the person, but some of the messages that we get from people who use Bob are that they say, "I've never been listened to so closely before,"
Wow.
or they say, "I've been at the job centre for 2 years, and this is the first time I've realised what my situation is," or they say, "Thank you so much, Monsieur Bob." Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's in a way it's I don't come from a tech background, and I think that's really useful in doing the job that I do, because in a way it's surprising, and it's humbling. It's a bit scary to see how people can get so close to this AI.
Yeah.
But it also shows the potential of adding these principles and philosophy into
Designing it
the
into it.
experience,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
designing the care into the algorithm.
So I'm going to move on. Thank you for that. I'm going to move on to Nat at the end, Nat Wally from Organise. So loosely speaking, your job is to sort of throw monkey wrenches into organisations. Is that right?
Absolutely, and I love it.
Yeah.
So Organise, our mission is to give everybody the tools, the network, and the confidence to make change happen in their workplace. And I think kind of the easiest way to describe it is probably to talk you through a campaign that we've got running this week. So the tools we offer, at the moment we offer sort of petitions and surveys, so anyone can go onto our platform and start running a survey. So we've got a woman called Karen this week. She works at Boots. She's worked at Boots for like 10 years. She's running a survey to find out if other people have the same problem that she has. So Karen's a mum and she can't take off her holidays when her kids are off school. And part of the problem is at Boots, for some reason, you have to book your holidays a year in advance, and you have to book all of them a year in advance, so you don't have any flexibility within that. And she was like, maybe it's just her store. So she works in Chelmsford, maybe it's just a Chelmsford store. So she started running a survey to figure out, hang on, is this just me or is it everyone across the country at Boots? And within a week, she got 200 Boots workers to respond, so then she's got a data set that she can use. And I think this plays on something you just said, Joanne. Like, they feel like Bob's listening to them. People haven't been asked what it's like at their work for so long. Like, in a lot of white-collar jobs, you get asked it quite often, but in blue-collar jobs, often you don't get asked at all. So people are really eager to fill out these surveys and share their experience, because sometimes the first time they've had an opportunity to do that. So already, Karen's then got 200 people on this survey, and the beauty of our tools is anyone who takes part in like a survey or a petition.
So Karen can create the survey.
So
Karen doesn't have to ask you whether you could create the survey.
So Karen
she
does
can
that
create
herself.
the survey.
Yeah.
How does she find the other Boots people?
So it's a combination. There's either people who already exist in our community, so our community is now 50,000 strong, and that comes from national petitions. So anyone who signs a petition puts in their workplace, so they're joining that network. That network's always growing. And the other thing is there are already loads of networks that exist within workplaces in WhatsApp groups. So if you're trying to swap a shift with someone, you're probably in a WhatsApp group of 30 of your colleagues. So if you drop a survey in there, you're going to pull a load of those in, and then you've got them within your network of organised members that you can talk to directly. And that's where the power starts to come in, because the network builds confidence.
And is it your sense that social media tools like WhatsApp and others are being used extensively by workers to communicate with one another? Yes.
Like, totally. So we've got a lot of Amazon warehouse workers who use our platform. And they work, the warehouses are in like these remote places, there's no bus services, so the only way to get to work is to car share. So there are these huge networks of Amazon workers who are sharing lifts to and from work. So it's a network that exists for kind of like an informal, non-sort of collective action reason, but can then be utilised to kind of take kind of like exciting political action.
So your most recent, most famous campaign was about Ted Baker, who hugged people a lot, and the founder hugged, that's a sort of euphemism, I think, also may have worn his underpants in the office, outside his trousers or whatever. But that works, those campaigns with big high-profile companies.
Yeah.
I suppose the question is, so you run a campaign, what then? How do you kind of turn that into real change that really helps people?
So I think Ted Baker's a great example, right? So it's a well-known brand, and all of a sudden you had sort of 300 of their staff taking action, and that made headline news like around the world, easy to win change in that space. What we saw off the back of that was loads of people coming to our platform and being like, I work for a company of 50 people. I can't run a petition because they'll know it's me. And I'm going to lose my job. So what can you offer me there? Like, our mission as a company is to give people the tools. So we've actually launched an app today, conveniently. It's an app that our members have designed. So 400 of them fed into what this should look like. It's an app to help you basically collect evidence of what's happening to you at work. So you've got a bank of evidence if you need it, whether you're being harassed or bullied or discriminated against, and basically it packages it up into a case file that you can just give to a lawyer or your union rep or your HR boss. But it's kind of packaged up and done that legwork for you. And that's as a response of basically like, sometimes collective action isn't the way to fix it. If you're being bullied, it's very difficult to go in and collect a survey of other people trying to find out if they've been bullied too. But making sure people have the right tools to make change happen in their work is kind of what organisers aim to do.
Two final questions for you then. Have you had any interaction with trade unions in this process? Do they see you as helpful to them or a competitor to them?
I think it depends on the union. So some of them see us definitely as a bit of a threat, but I'd like to see everyone, our tools are free to use at the moment, to pick up and use them to build networks of people who could be members of unions. I think that would be an exciting way for it to go. Yeah. Some unions really embrace it. So the IWGB, who are another award winner, I don't know if anyone's here tonight, a lot of their riders, they have a lot of delivery riders in their couriers branch, and they use our tools to basically campaign for changes within Deliveroo. So they've got a campaign running at the moment to be able to see the second location you're cycling to, because basically you have to accept it and it's a gamble. It could be 5 miles, could be 1 mile, and you're getting paid the same for that job. So they're campaigning to change that through our platform, and that's the kind of collaboration I think could be really powerful.
Where do you think you're headed? What's your ambition for Organise is just under 2 years old.
Yeah.
How many people are you in?
50,000.
50,000 members, and how many people in the organisation?
4 of us.
4.
Yeah.
So that's quite an impressive leverage. So where do you think you could be headed? Where would you like to be?
So I think the thing I'm most excited about is the power of the data. So at the moment, people are aggregating data across workplaces, but when you start to anonymize that data and aggregate it nationally, which we can do from our app, but also from the platform that we have, you could do some really exciting things like giving people proactive access to a lawyer, maybe before they know they need one, where you've seen these patterns of behavior happening in workplaces. And I think there's a lot of power in that kind of like using technology for good.
Right.
And giving people more access and like proactive access to those rights, and that's what I'm most excited about.
So I don't know, Sarah, what you do. Do you have a big thing with data and members of SMART? Are they more prepared to share data with you? Because all 3 of these are very data rich, I suppose. They all depend on rich data to offer better solutions.
Well, we use the data to understand more the reality of our members. The thing is, they are not binded to us, so we only see what they do with us. We don't know necessarily if they have another job somewhere else, a steady job, full-time, part-time, if they have unemployment benefits, or if they're having other freelancing on their own. We don't know that.
Because you're very free and easy for people to come and go, and that's part of the growth that you've had with all these people in kind of slash jobs and part-time contracts. And I mean, basically you were created by artists, but then the whole of the labour market has kind of moved in your direction, I suppose. What do you think is the biggest thing that would allow your growth? Because in ways you could be quite culturally specific, that smart solution. Do you think it is, or do you think it could grow?
Well, we are active in 9 European countries, so Europe, compared to the rest of the world, has a very specific frame of social protection and labor law and so on. We are starting now in Montreal, and we are also with other organizations supporting some co-ops of freelancers in some Northern African countries. So here we're discovering other realities. So there is, of course, the legal aspects, but for us, I think freelancing, we see all the data that shows that freelancing is booming everywhere. And there is this kind of reborn of need for mutual support. And this is what we're providing. And we've seen today also other examples of mutualization, which are very interesting. So I think this is really very interesting. So, but we also think that if there's more social protection that is state provided, it's also more interesting for the members. And we provide salaried status because it's the most protective. But we are more inclined in having a more universal approach of social protection. If you work and if you have to work to make a living, you need to have access to the same things, the same rights, regardless of how you're working and under what legal status. So I think that could help a lot.
Jonathan, what's the biggest thing that would help you grow, do you think? Or is it just demand that's driving your growth from within companies and from people who want to show what skills that they've got?
I would say when we started Credly a little over 6 years ago, one of the more common questions I heard in the first part of our journey was coming from universities and colleges and training providers who said, if we issue a certification, a credential, a better signal for what we observe among our learners, will employers actually care about it? And in that time, employers have actually become the largest issuers of credentials for skills, because after all, over the course of your life, you'll probably spend 99% of it in the world of work, where you'll be demonstrating skills. There is a role for university. It's a lifelong role, but there's a role for employers to play a role in verifying your skills. We have more employers issuing credentials now than there are degrees being issued by universities every year. So now the question becomes, if an employer issues a credential, what will the rest of the community do? What will other employers do? What will universities do? Will they accept it for credit? Will they shorten the path towards a degree or a certification? Will another employer accept that credential? And I think the thing that's changing that supply and demand, when you put it under one roof and an employer becomes an issuer of credentials, And the reason they do, by the way, is because it helps project that you're a great place to work, that you recognize your employees. It shows that you'll be a lifelong learner. They'll see 7 times the number of people completing their training programs when they have a credential versus when they don't. They'll see an impact on their bottom line. Most companies that introduce a recognition technology like what we do will see tremendous growth in revenue because they have happier employees, more productive employees, and they're putting the right skilled people on the job. So for us, I think continuing to get employers to take what can sometimes see as a counterintuitive step, which is set free the skills of your workers so that they can be empowered to tell their story and recognize that they will more likely stay because you've done that than leave. And so there's a momentum building around employers saying that portable skills are a benefit and they should be offered to every employee.
Yeah. So I'm going to, if there are any questions or comments from anyone in the audience for our panel, then please do put your hand up. There's a lady there. Is there anyone else anywhere else in the room? And there's someone here. Just quickly tell us who you are.
My question is mostly for Organize, but for all of you in terms of data protection laws. The fact that you have information about various individuals, whatever, what's to stop an employer coming to you and saying, we'd like to know what information you have on our organization? You've mentioned that the findings of sorts are anonymous, but for all of you, how do you handle data protection issues when it just seems so convoluted, even as an individual, to get your own information or get your own point across?
And then a lady here.
Is it on? Christina Langheim, a long-time fellow, self-employed branding consultant. By the way, I love the name Bob. It's what I gave my son. So my question is to Jonathan, is in terms of employees, what's the mix between men and women? From my experience, and I'm not going to name names, but men are very good at inflating their CVs compared to women. I'm just going to put it out there. And, you know, that could detract them from wanting to actually even be part of your process.
It could deter...
So, employees from, you know...
Because it creates a currency when actually you're kind of...
They're working on a different currency that...
Yeah. No, you're
Sorry.
speaking to someone who, my only qualification is PPE from Oxford, which is just kind of like bullshit, really. So, yeah, Jonathan, how do you prevent inflation? And then perhaps Nat and others, what do you do about data? When you've got all this data coming through, how do you protect people?
And for the record, I like the name Bob. Bob too. Bob was my dad's name. And I'd like to think that he's the soul of Bob Employ.
It'd be easy if we were just all called Bob.
Exactly.
A nasty Bob.
Everybody knows a Bob. So I think your question is a terrific one, and it's something that everyone on our team thinks about every day, which is, first of all, how do we make sure that in creating better signals for skills, we're not creating more obstacles when we're intending to actually break down barriers for people. I remember back in 2011 or 12, as we were getting ready to start the company, I went to visit a museum in New York. It was the Museum of Modern Art, where I was meeting with a group of educators, one of whom was involved in the juvenile justice programs they offered to help previously incarcerated youth find pathways towards careers. And everyone was a fan of what we were talking about doing with portable credentials, but this one individual was very skeptical and said, what I don't want to see is us create, people come to my programs because I don't have grades and I don't have certifications. This is a safe place for them to discover who they are and what they know. And I wouldn't want to create another barrier where they think they have to be this tall to ride this ride. And that's stayed with me as we've been developing Credly, to make sure that what we're trying to do is bring transparency to the labor market. Our focus is not helping the people with fancy degrees like Charlie's that will navigate the labor market and whose pedigree will be a good helper in that regard. but to actually surface people based on the merits. And so a lot of the partners and the customers that we work with are ones who are going deeper than the high-level proxies we use. To your question about gender, we're seeing parity on that front, and also surprisingly, the age range of people served is fairly wide. It turns out that people that are traditionally nearing retirement still care about learning new skills. In fact, they're thinking about how they're going to stay active and mentally engaged and contribute even later in their life, and picking up new skills and having a way to show that despite how they might look or be perceived, they actually have something to offer, including the recency of their skills.
Great. So Nat, what do you do about data? And also, Joanna, you're obviously gathering all sorts of data about your people using your platform.
So it's a really important question. Thank you. I think there's two answers from the organised side. So the key thing is the data that's being collected is driven by the members. So they're generally collecting stuff that they would be comfortable sharing, and I think that's quite an important thing to remember. The two sides of it are, one, there are companies out there who are collecting so much data. So Amazon, for example, have a patent on a wristband that you wear, and it tracks like where you're moving your hand on your shift. So they're collecting that kind of data. What Amazon workers have been collecting data on our side is actually how often they're able to go to the toilet. Really simple thing, but the fact that actually if they go to the toilet on their shifts, the toilets are so far away that they end up getting a warning, and you get 3 warnings and you get fired. Because basically if you go to the loo, you're away from shift too long, you can't hit your targets. And so they used that and aggregated that data to show to Amazon, actually, this isn't fair, and it triggered nationwide inspections. So I think that's one side of where companies have loads of data, and they're collecting data kind of to challenge what the companies know. And the other side of it, we have a load of co-op workers. So there's about 5,000 co-op workers who, they're experiencing a lot of armed robberies at the moment on the co-op because they changed the way they do their shifts. And the co-op head office had no idea about this because you're not paid to fill out the incident report. And it happens so frequently, they'd given up calling the police. So co-op head office had no idea of the volume of armed robberies that were happening in their stores because they didn't have the right mechanisms to collect that data. So data, I think, is becoming an interesting tool in terms of advocacy to kind of leverage that. But yeah, I think that's the two.
And Joanna, what do you, so you've got 200,000 people who've used your platform. So
Yeah.
you must know a lot about who's looking for jobs, where they're looking, what jobs are coming up in real time.
So we did know about all of those people, but because of the GDPR regulation, we have forgotten about lots of them, and that's the real key to that. And that's what's so liberating about being a non-profit, and with the model that we have is that we, the agreement with the user is that when we will never ever use their data, we'll never sell their data to anything else. And I can't remember actually what the GDPR cutoff date is, but we register the fact that we have this person, the number, but we delete their email and their name and everything after a certain amount of time. And the idea of Bob is that you go on and you get your diagnostic of your job, of your employability, and you can save that as a PDF, you can print it out, and you can sign up to coaching emails if you want that help you how to improve your body language in an interview or how to contact your network. But you don't have to. You can also say, I don't want any emails, and then that can be the end of the whole thing. And so it's a really different experience from social networks.
The problem with scaling Bob is that you would have to do it with a sort of French English, wouldn't you? You couldn't just do Bob. Could you do Bob in English? Or
yeah, I've translated it already into English.
Could after this, if any of us wanted to go and visit Bob, could we go and visit him?
Yeah.
Yes,
actually, if anyone wants to try out a dummy version of Bob in English, then just come and ask me, and I'll send you the link to the mock-up in English.
Right.
And if anyone wants to try out their French, it's designed so that it's a very easy French.
Right.
So I think many of you would be able to give it a go.
There are a number of common themes here which go through the whole awards, which these four to some extent exemplify. One is the importance of new forms of sharing collective action, collective belonging and work, and sharing risk, and people searching for sort of forms of organisation and status, which is sort of somewhere between employed and self-employed in some sense. A second is this connection between data and voice, that how to get the data to be able to have the voice to be able to influence it. And the other is this thing about making talent transparent. There are a number of the award winners which are basically about correcting biases, I suppose, that the labour market is full of biases, human biases about who's talented, where they come from, what you're looking for. And actually technology can be used in all sorts of interesting ways to open that up. And there are amongst the winners all sorts of fantastic organisations. Both Nat and Sarah mentioned, I think, you mentioned working with Uber and you mentioned working with Deliveroo. So one of the reasons that I got involved in this is that my nephew, who got A's in every subject he did at school and then went to university and got a very good degree in English literature and then came out, became a Deliveroo driver, cyclist. And his patch was in our bit where we live, and he would come and hide with us in his house at the end of his 3-hour shift. And one 3-hour shift he came and said, it was right at the end, he'd been working really hard, he's going home. I said, what are you going to do then? He said, well, I'm going to have lunch. I said, what are you going to do for lunch? He said, well, problem is I've been cycling for 3 hours, so I'm really hungry, but I haven't managed to buy any food. So what are you going to do? He said, well, I'll get a Deliveroo. And there was just this sort of nightmare vision of the entire young population just subsisting by delivering takeaway food to one another, that persuaded me that we needed some sort of better future of work. And that's what these awards are about. It's about exactly what we're seeing here, which is about we can make a difference. It doesn't need to be ominous and foreboding. You can shape the future of work. Phoebe, you've got one last question. Here, quickly. Yeah.
Phoebe from Inspiral. I had a quick question for Jonathan. As you were talking about Credly, I think it's really exciting, but I couldn't help thinking about the Chinese social credit system sort of thing as a potential negative future of letting, employees kind of employers rate their employees, or, when you compare that to the university system where you have, examinations and they remove the name from the examination, how can you stop it kind of connects with what Nat's doing with like bullying or coercion in the workplace. How do you separate that out from giving people
coercive credentialing?
Yeah, or you have a bully boss and they don't recognize your skills. It could be nightmarish. Just wondering what you've thought about that.
Yeah, that's an important question. I think a couple of things. First of all, every individual earns a credential, decides who and when and how and whether they want to share it or own it or never connect to it in any way. So hopefully it's additive and you're telling the story that you want to share and you're curating your own story. This is not a record that gets written in public. It's first written for you and you choose what to do with it. Secondly, there is a lot of natural incentives for employers and organizations, whether they're nonprofits or for-profits, to recognize that when they mint a currency, what they are recognizing says as much about them as an organization as it does about the individual they're recognizing. And most organizations are taking very seriously what level of rigor. If I'm going to stand behind this and say this person can do this or has learned this, I want to be respected among my peers, my customers, the world at large. And so they spend a fair amount of time trying to say as much as they can and as helpful a way as they can that still reflects on both parties really well. But at the end of the day, it's up to the individual to accept it and to take it forward.
So, without further ado, please join me in thanking Nat Wally, Joanna Boufoy, Sarah de Hirsch-Ripassin, and Jonathan Finkelstein. Thank you very much indeed. And so now we're going to move onwards. Have been made possible with the support of Barclays Life Skills Programme. And so we're delighted to be joined by Kirsty Mackey and Stephen Roberts from Barclays, who are Steve's just going to say a few words, and Kirsty's going to hand out the awards.
Can I
Stephen, yes, go ahead.
Thank you. There were three things.
Yeah, go on.
Say that. The first one I like Bob too. And I used to work with someone called Bob, but no kids.
Yes.
And the second one was to say a huge thank you to Charlie, first of all, and the RSA and Capital Partners for letting us be part of this incredible thing. It's a huge privilege and it's been huge fun. And the third thing, I just wanted to clarify that we're not an easy touch, as the way Charlie described it was a year ago, and he just popped over and said, can we have a load of money to do this stuff that I'm doing? It doesn't work like that. And I wanted to explain why we worked hard to find the money to do this. And what we've been doing, what Kirsty's been leading over the last 6 years, it is life skills, which is giving young people those skills that go beyond what's taught in school to help them move forward in life into whatever they decide to do in work life. At the same time, we've been trying through digital Eagles and more latterly through with Eagle Labs to transform what we do in our physical environment, which used to be branches, into making those useful places for the community. A bit like that. Okay, I'm sorry. I hope you, the last stuff was okay, but it was, anyway. So, what we've been doing with the branches is turning them into incubation centres for high growth companies, as well as places where we can teach children to code and give access to people to advanced manufacturing techniques. We've opened now the 22nd Eagle Lab around the UK. We now run the largest high-growth business incubator network in the UK in terms of number of sites in our buildings, and trying to make ourselves useful. We'll have another 5 of them before the middle of the year. So please come and have a look what they look like. We're trying to help as far as we possibly can to be useful in a working environments that changing. A personal reflection, listening to the award winners downstairs, what a beautiful group of companies. Absolutely incredible. And my God, the 4 that were up here. So we are going to try and connect with all of those. Absolutely incredible. And I was thinking, oh my God, I'm so old. I've got 4 sons that are 19 to 27. 2 of them have already done 3 times more jobs with companies than I've done in the 29 years I've worked at Barclays. And it was only listening to this. I'm the last of this generation that is going to be employed for that length of time with one company. It's absolutely incredible how just my children showing how this whole world of work has changed. This work is so important, and what you're doing is so wonderful and beautiful. It's a huge thank you, and a huge thank you, Charlie.
No, thank you.
Thank you.
No, take it with you. Stephen, that's very heartfelt. So actually another theme is that a lot of the people who use these kinds of services want flexible forms of work, but they want flexible forms of work which are secure rather than insecure. So they don't necessarily want a 9-to-5 job, but they want a security that goes with flexibility. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Kirsty if you're ready now just to welcome to the stage in no particular order Ind Eldrissi from WeMind. WeMind is a collective of 20,000 freelancers in France that provides access to a range of insurance products, including, remarkably, a rent guarantee, so that if you're a freelancer, you get a guarantee of your rent, so you can actually rent a flat. Sho Sugihara is from Portify, a fintech group which uses alternative credit scoring to provide better priced loans and credits to gig workers in the UK so that they're not disadvantaged in the financial services market. Thank you, Sho. If you get a chance, do speak to Matteo Serra later, from all the way from Colombia, from Bogota, from Hogaru, which is a gig platform for cleaners that directly employs more than 700 cleaners, turns them into employees in 5 cities in Colombia, and gives them full access to full employment benefits and other services such as microloans. Zofia Stachowska is from Link, which is a remarkable gig economy platform in Kenya, which employs Kenyan artisans. And Link provides them with training, loans, and other support. Phoebe Tickell is from Inspiral, which is a remarkable collaborative organisation based originally in New Zealand of mission-driven freelancers who come together to work collaboratively. So have we got anyone from IWGB? No. So IWGB are an award winner, but they're not here. So next up is Mark Hooper from IndieCube, which is a remarkable kind of shared workspace and platform for freelancers and independent workers based in South Wales. Dan Schlederman from Workit is not popular with Walmart or Amazon because Workit's a digital platform that uses AI to help people get their rights at work from trusted advisors and others. Noella Moshi has joined us today from Nigeria, and WAVE, a training program that's empowered young people in West Africa with skills to become self-employed and to take up employment opportunities. Jessica Ball is from a great program from New York City called Pursuit, which is creating pathways for people doing blue-collar jobs to get jobs in the high-tech sector. All the way from Delhi is Suvanka Mishra from Bloom, which is a digital platform for smallholder farmers, providing access to information, finance, and markets, working in emerging economies around the world. And then please welcome back on stage Jonathan Finkelstein from Credly, who you've already met. Sarah de Hirsch-Ribassin from Smart. Joanna from Bob. And Nat Wally from Organize. Thank you, Kirsty. And there are a series of other winners that you can look at and see on our site, and we'll be doing more about them and with them. And they are Catalyte, LRNG, Educate, and Laboratorio in the skills and training category. Some great projects in diversity and inclusion, Inclumi and Ultra, in improving management and HR systems within companies, NAC and Giraffe. And then a series of organizations which we've given awards to because they're at very early stages. Contrados, which is a really remarkable organization working with Mexican migrant workers in the US. Apply, which is a fairer gig economy platform. Comunidad for Uno. Bertzog, the very well-known collective and cooperative care approach to care. And Equitier, which is a kind of tech for good venture. So that is just a first cut. That was our first year from a standing start. And so what we want to do is to build this and develop it, not just as a set of awards, but as a community of innovators who are devising new and better ways for people to work. And we want to attract to that community investors who can back these organizations, ways of developing them through accelerators and other programs, and so that we develop a field of innovations around work to give people a sense that work is there for them to shape, have a voice in, and to make their own. So thank you very much for coming. The hashtag is Future Work Awards. Please do join us downstairs for a glass of wine, and hopefully we'll see you next year. Thank you very much.